The Rainwater Killer, Episode 13, a Haunted Library exclusive series. The following is from a third-person point of view as the story happens. On the eve of a hunter's moon, Olivia White went out for a jog. She was an active 35-year-old woman. Attractive at 5'5" and 120 pounds, she had black hair and brown eyes. Exercise helped keep her body sculpted at this age, along with a proper diet. She could run a mile in under 7 minutes and loved to spend her free time at the gym and library. Being a nurse practitioner, however, she didn't always have a whole lot of free time. But tonight, she had a few hours before bed, and she wanted to be outside in the rain, jogging to the sound of some 80s Bee Gees. The feel-good, upbeat song, "The One," was playing in her earbuds as she came to a stop near Sycamore in Syracuse. After a bus and a few cars drove by, she crossed the road, jogging towards Washington Street. It was 12 a.m. 5 minutes later, she began to slow her pace. She was now in Greenville, a suburb of New York City, where she lived, near the Hudson River Valley. The city lights behind her grew dimmer as she jogged towards home. On the opposite side of the street, a dark figure slowly followed about 50 feet behind and had been following her since she jogged away from 7th Avenue in Manhattan. He walked at a brisk pace, allowing her to jog ahead, keeping himself out of sight. He wore black sweats, black tennis shoes, and a black hoodie over his head. Every few seconds he would jog too, to keep her in his sight. She came to a stop in front of her house and walked to the door, taking in deep breaths from the run. She fumbled with her house keys in the dark, and that's when she was grabbed from behind. The man put his hands over her mouth. He instructed her not to scream or he would put a bullet in her. He turned, moving her body with his, facing the street. Nobody was outside. The house was behind a dense patch of woods that ran along the subdivision. He pushed her into the woods, staying behind her, his feet stepping on hers as he clung to her closely, his grip on her strong. Once fully emerged in the woods, he took a rag from the back of his pocket and tied it around her mouth to the back of her head, effectively gagging her and preventing her from screaming. She kept calm and steadied her breathing despite his dry, large hand pressed tight over her mouth. She knew there was a chance she could be sexually attacked, or even killed, or maybe both. A million thoughts raced through her head as he continued to push her deeper into the woods. Her kids in New Jersey, her mom in Maine, her job at the clinic, her dog. All those years that she had spent her life becoming a doctor, only to possibly have this stolen away by a killer that she had learned about a few weeks ago, but had failed to abide the police warnings. She dismissed these thoughts and went into survival mode. The man towered over her, his breathing also measured under the rain mask. Once he thought they were deep enough to not be heard, he tied her to a tree, binding her body tightly. She was finally able to get a look at him, though there wasn't much to see. It was black in here, and his clothing and mask didn't help matters any, being black too. He had large eyes, though, and she could tell he had some faint white colors on his black rain mask. For the first hour, he continually circled the tree, touching her face while walking at times. She cried and sobbed, wondering what he was going to do next. He said nothing through all this, just kept walking around her as if studying her. The second hour it began to rain again. They were both soaked at this point. She shook from the chill the rain brought and the steady breeze that was now sifting through the trees. He had now pulled a knife and continued his circular walk around the tree, increasing her fear even more. Her muffled cries were finally silenced by him placing the knife near her face. This was the closest his face had been to hers yet. She saw more of his eyes now. They were dark, penetrating, intense eyes. Predatorial eyes, similar to that of a wolf. They barely looked human. She held her breath as he ran the knife along her wet face, under her eyes, above her eyes, softly penetrating her lips, then her forehead, then at the top of her head. He held the butt of the knife tight as the tip of the knife pointed into her skull. She began to think this was where he would stab her first, in the head. Fear began to subside for her. There was a sense of calm now as she had all but accepted her inevitable death. She silently said a prayer that it would be fast and mostly painless. As if sensing this, he stepped back and stared at her some more. Another full hour passed with him standing in place, barely moving, hands to the side, stiff, staring at her as she avoided his face. Terrified and exhausted, she couldn't even cry anymore, so she kept praying. Her prayers were apparently answered when he finally stepped toward her sometime after 3 a.m. and cut the rope. He covered her mouth and pressed her against the tree.
Tell your friends that I let you live, and don't be playing in the dark anymore. You never know what you'll run into. Don't speak or scream until I'm long gone. If I hear you, I'll come back and catch you and disembowel you. I'll see you in your nightmares.
The man began to slowly walk off, almost as if testing her. She stood still and stayed quiet, relief flooding her body. She had been sure that she was going to die, and the fact that she was going to get out of this terrifying predicament unscathed, she considered a miracle. Olivia waited until the man was completely out of sight before making a run for the house. Her dash was cut short, though, when she fell into a tripwire rope, immediately yanking her by the ankles, upside down, suspended in the cold night air. Helpless and vulnerable, she screamed for help for the next 2 hours, wondering if her attacker would come to finish her off and keep his promise. It wouldn't be until 5 a.m. when her neighbor walked to his car to go to work that her pleas were answered. He had heard the screams coming from behind his house and called 911. I woke to a loud knock. I looked at the clock, then cursed myself as I glanced at my phone that I had missed 3 calls and some numerous texts. I had slept right through it. I put on a pair of sweats and answered the door to see Lutz. "Morning, sunshine," he said, winking. "What'd I miss?" I said, wide-eyed, though I was still half asleep. "We have a woman who was kidnapped, but seems to be unharmed." "What? What happened?" "I'll fill you in on the way to the hospital. She's at Northwest Health." I turned and began to dress. He walked in and sat down on the bed. The look on his face wasn't right. "There's also something else, Frank. I just got a call from Arkansas. Apparently, your daughter has been trying to reach you. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but she has cancer, Frank. You should call her once you dress." "What?" "She's going in for emergency surgery. She wanted me to tell you. I guess she went to the ER last night and they discovered it during an ultrasound. She had some pain. Perhaps you may want to take the next flight back to Arkansas. She was trying to reach you throughout the night and wanted me to give you the message." I went for my phone and read the texts. She said it was stage 2 kidney cancer. My stomach went sour and shock hit me. "My daughter is all I have left, John," I said, my lips quivering. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Look, I'm not sure if we're going to catch this guy without you, but you're needed at home. If you want to be dismissed from the case, you have my full understanding. Right now, let's go to the hospital and talk to the victim. Take a few breaths. Coffee's on me. Let's go." I quickly dressed, trying to come to terms with the attack on another victim and my daughter having cancer. There would be a chance this would be my last week on the case.